Most people live in a constant state of distraction, enslaved by opinions, approval, and the noise of the world. Their minds are weak, their attention scattered, and their power drained. This video solves one thing: how to become mentally untouchable by mastering the coldest rule of all: ruthless self-focus. You will understand how internal power is built in silence, and why the man who focuses only on himself becomes a weapon the world cannot ignore or control. The first war every man must fight is internal. It is silent, invisible, and brutal. It's not against enemies in the world. It's against the scattered fragments of his own undisciplined mind. This is where all failure begins. A man who cannot control what he focuses on is already defeated. Not by weapons, not by politics, but by distraction. The most dangerous kind of warfare is not waged with guns or swords. It is waged through attention theft. Every second your mind is not focused on your own mission, it's being exploited by someone else's. People think betrayal comes from enemies. No, betrayal comes from within. Every time you scroll without reason, gossip without gain, or consume information that doesn't serve your strategy, that's not entertainment. That's mental surrender. Every piece of your attention given away carelessly becomes a liability. The more you look outward, the less you govern inward. A man who sees himself as the center of strategy, who protects his mind like a fortress, becomes a force that cannot be manipulated. This isn't about motivation. This is psychological warfare. You will never dominate anything outside of you until you dominate everything inside of you. The weak man is a servant to trends, approval, opinions, gossip, noise. He constantly reacts to things that don't matter and is driven by the emotional temperature of the people around him. He is unstable, directionless, and vulnerable to influence. And the worst part, he believes he's making choices. But he is only responding to bait, set by more focused men. The man without self-focus cannot tell the difference between what is urgent and what is important. He runs in every direction, but none of them lead to sovereignty. This is the hidden power of self-focus. It removes 99% of the noise from your life. You stop responding, you stop explaining, you stop proving, you stop pleasing, you observe, you calculate. You disappear from the arenas that entertain the herd. You exit the noise, and in that exit, you become stronger. Because now, for the first time, you are not spending your energy, you are storing it. And when a man learns to store his mental energy, he becomes unpredictable. And unpredictable men become dangerous, not because they're aggressive, but because they're unavailable. Self-focus does not mean selfishness. It means choosing strategic silence over useless noise. It means living under your own mental flag instead of waving someone else's. When you eliminate emotional clutter, a new kind of power rises. The power of clarity. Clarity of thought, clarity of intention, clarity of action, and with clarity comes leverage. Most people move blindly. They act without understanding. Their focus is divided among 100 shallow interests, but the focused man builds silently in the shadows, one step at a time, and by the time others notice, it's already too late. The game has already been played, and they weren't even invited. A man who masters focus becomes less visible but more powerful. You won't see him in arguments, debates, or pointless conflicts. He is not reactive. He is calculating. He chooses his enemies carefully. He spends his days crafting himself, not chasing people, and this is what makes him terrifying to those who are addicted to external validation. They don't understand his silence. They don't understand his absence. They don't understand why he isn't moved by their opinions. That's the point. You don't understand a weapon until it strikes. And by then, it's too late. The reason self-focus is feared is because it creates emotional independence. The man who only competes with his former self is immune to comparison. You can't shame him. You can't flatter him. You can't distract him with trends, women, gossip, or drama. He has made himself the mission, and the man who is his own mission can never be turned into a servant. This is the foundation of all mental power, to train your mind to return to itself again and again until no storm, no insult, no noise can redirect it. That is why you must treat self-focus as a weapon, not as a mindset, not as a lifestyle trend, but as an offensive maneuver in a world of mental slaves. Use it to cut off what drains you. Use it to destroy your past self. Use it to attack your own weaknesses before someone else does. Build a mind so fortified, so insulated from noise, that people feel uneasy in your presence, not because you speak loudly, but because you speak so little. You are not here to be understood. You are here to be effective. And that effectiveness is only forged through ruthless, obsessive, unapologetic self-focus. The man who chooses to fixate entirely on himself becomes a threat to every system built on distraction, dependency, and obedience. He is not admirable in the way society wants men to be. He is not polite, agreeable, or easily managed. He is dangerous because he is inwardly possessed. He answers to his own voice, and every day he sharpens his thoughts like blades. Most people live outward. Their mind is constantly bleeding into the world, seeking opinions, validation, applause. Their attention is diluted, and as a result, so is their power. They are always digesting someone else's ideas, following someone else's timeline, reacting to someone else's urgency. But the man who has made himself the object of his obsession does not chase the world. He builds his own. To fixate on yourself is to declare war on weakness, not in others, but in your own character. It means seeing every flaw, every insecurity, every emotional crack, and taking it personally. This man does not wait for discipline to find him. He enforces it like law. He has rules for himself that no one sees. His rituals are invisible, the results are undeniable. While the average man blames the world, this man studies his patterns. While the average man wants approval, this man wants precision. While others consume for entertainment, he consumes for extraction. He sees information as ammunition, not as dopamine. He understands a rare truth that power is built not in public, but in private. In hours no one sees, in thoughts no one hears. His mind is not a democracy, it is a dictatorship. Emotions are allowed to speak, but they do not get to vote. Comfort is acknowledged, but it is not obeyed. Doubt appears, but it is silenced. He has only one loyalty, his own evolution. Every interaction, every decision, every setback becomes fuel for this relentless internal machinery. He does not avoid pain. He studies it. He examines his reactions the way a strategist studies enemy movement. This is why he becomes untouchable. Not because he hides from life's strikes, but because every strike makes him sharper. The world tries to wound him, but he responds by building armor. When you fixate on yourself, you remove your greatest liability, the need for external rescue. There is no savior, no magical force, no person coming to fix your story. The man who accepts this becomes free. In that freedom, he becomes lethal. His solitude becomes sacred. While others feel empty when alone, he feels powerful. He uses that space to listen to his own mind, to shape it, to master it. He does not fill silence with noise. He lets silence sharpen him, and the more he sharpens, the more the world fears his presence. Not because he is violent, but because he is controlled. Control is the quietest form of dominance, and it begins with obsession. Obsession with personal power, precision, strength, not for display, but for impact. This man does not advertise his focus. He does not boast about his grind. He doesn't romanticize the process. He does it because it's non-negotiable. He is obsessed with becoming a man that cannot be broken, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually. He is not arrogant, but he is unshakable. He does not react to insults. He does not flinch at rejection. He does not fear being misunderstood, because everything that would normally disturb the average man has already been dissected and discarded within himself. Fixation is not delusion, it's design. Most people drift. They wake up with no internal compass. They wait for the world to give them instructions. But this man creates the instructions. He programs his morning. He decides what deserves his energy. He writes the script instead of auditioning for it. His life is not reactive. It is a deliberate strike. He doesn't float through existence. He calculates it, orchestrates it, and if needed, burns part of it down just to rebuild it better. The fixation with self makes him immune to gossip, noise, and distraction. He does not trade energy for temporary approval. He holds it, stores it, channels it. People will call this selfish, cold, or even arrogant. That's fine. Their words are projections, and their lives are proof of the cost of living externally. The man who is fixated on himself becomes immune to the very things that paralyze others: confusion, hesitation, self-doubt. These are diseases of the unfocused. But when you've made yourself the singular mission, you no longer beg for motivation. You generate it. You don't chase people. You attract by force. You don't ask for power. You build it in isolation. You become a moving fortress, not because of how loud you are, but because of how little you need from anyone else. This kind of man is hard to read. His silence isn't emptiness, it's strategy. He doesn't speak to be liked. He speaks to test. He speaks to influence. Or he doesn't speak at all. His presence alone shifts the atmosphere because he brings with him the weight of someone who has built himself in private, and this is what makes him untouchable. Not just his results, but the psychological depth behind those results. You cannot replicate this kind of man. You can only build him, brick by brutal brick, through ruthless self-devotion. He is not distracted by enemies because he is too focused on his own empire, and that empire starts inside his own mind. When a man locks his focus inward, something strange happens. His emotions begin to lose their power over him. The tides of insecurity, guilt, and shame still rise, but they no longer control the direction of the ship. He becomes the observer of his emotions, not the servant to them. And this, without even trying, turns him into something rare, emotionally independent. Not in theory, but in action. His inner compass stops trembling. His hands stop shaking in the face of rejection. His eyes no longer scan the room for approval. He becomes, at his core, self-contained. This is not taught, it is forged. You cannot train emotional independence by reading about it. You earn it through self-focus, not by blocking emotion, but by stripping it of its power to interfere with strategy. Feelings can remain, but they will not dominate. The average man moves based on how he feels. The disciplined man moves based on what he's building. When a man has no focus, emotion becomes his master. His highs are too high. His lows are too low. He falls in love with the idea of being loved. He takes offense at every rejection. He is fragile because he needs others to validate his state of mind. But the self-focused man is indifferent to praise and unmoved by insults, not because he is numb, but because he is anchored. His attention is not scattered outward. It is locked inward, building something, a goal, a structure, code. And the deeper he moves into this internal construction, the less the world can shake him. Emotional independence is a direct outcome of this focus. He no longer fears being alone because solitude has become his workshop. He doesn't collapse when others misunderstand him because he's not building his identity on their understanding. Their confusion is expected. Their judgment is irrelevant. Their acceptance is optional. He knows that the more obsessed he becomes with his mission, the less space there will be for emotional dependency. Every time he focuses on himself, instead of reacting to the world, he rewires his emotional circuitry. He trains his mind to respond with discipline instead of impulse. He teaches himself that feelings are data, not commands. He can feel anger without violence. He can feel pain without collapse. He can feel sadness without seeking attention. He no longer needs to explain himself because his silence has become more powerful than any justification. This is not emotional suppression. It is emotional command. The man who commands his emotions commands his entire life. Others become confused by this silence. They'll call it detachment, aloofness, or emotional coldness. But what they fail to see is that emotional independence is not about cutting people off. It is about no longer needing people to stabilize you. It is about removing the strings others can pull to make you dance. The more self-focused you become, you perform. You stop putting on a show for the world. You stop reacting to every comment. You stop caring whether you are perceived as likable, kind, or relatable. You aren't trying to fit into the world. You're trying to outgrow it. This kind of independence doesn't make you bitter. It makes you clear. You see through emotional manipulation instantly. Guilt stops working on you. Emotional blackmail is laughed at. Pity is no longer a weapon people can use against you. You begin to speak with clarity, act with precision, and walk away without looking back. You are not addicted to closure. You don't need to be understood. You're not controlled by moods, storms, or sentimentality. You are guided by internal law. This law is built brick by brick through years of disciplined self-focus, and no one, not lover, not friend, not family, has the authority to override it. Most people believe emotional control is about keeping a straight face. They're wrong. Emotional independence goes far deeper. It's not about hiding feeling. It's about filtering it through reason. A self-focused man feels everything, But what he doesn't do is allow those feelings to distort his judgment. He doesn't speak every time he feels. He doesn't chase every time he desires. He doesn't collapse every time he's hurt. He processes in silence. He thinks instead of reacts. He acts instead of begs. His emotional responses are weapons, not wounds. He can smile through war. He can bleed and still move forward. He can be hated and still hold the same gaze. This is what people misunderstand about real strength. It doesn't look loud. It looks calm. Emotional independence allows him to see others for what they truly are, not what he wishes them to be. He doesn't build fantasies around people. He studies their patterns. He recognizes manipulation with surgical clarity because he no longer projects emotional hunger onto others. He has fed himself internally. He doesn't need emotional candy from others to feel stable, and that makes him unbreakable in a world built on emotional dependency. While others live in emotional debt, constantly needing reassurance, constantly needing love, constantly needing support, he becomes his own source. His feelings no longer sabotage his focus. They serve it. They strengthen it. They sharpen it. He doesn't fear losing people. He fears losing control over himself. Because once you've made your own mind your fortress, everything else becomes optional. The job, the relationship, the status, it is all secondary to the inner power that cannot be taken. He walks away when peace is threatened, not because he doesn't care, but because he refuses to sell his mental stability for temporary emotional comfort. He understands that anything you depend on emotionally owns you, and he has decided that the only thing that will ever own him is the mission he has sworn to build within himself. Power speaks loudest when it says nothing. The world is addicted to noise, constant talking, endless opinions, desperate arguments. Everyone is trying to prove something, to gain attention, to signal strength with volume. But true strength doesn't make announcements. It operates in shadows. It moves without declaration, and it dominates without words. The man who has trained himself to be silent is not silent because he has nothing to say. He is silent because he has trained his ego to need nothing from the crowd. That silence creates discomfort. It creates uncertainty. It creates pressure because people cannot read what they cannot hear. A silent man becomes a mirror. When he enters a room, people project their insecurities onto him. They begin to explain themselves, over-justify, speak, because the absence of noise demands self-reflection, and most people are terrified of their own reflection. This is why silence is dominance. It puts others on the defensive. It forces them to reveal more than they should. A man who speaks little gains more intel than a man who constantly broadcasts his thoughts. While others talk to be understood, he observes to understand. While others chase attention, he collects information. And while others try to control perception, he becomes the one who controls the tempo. In silence, your moves become unpredictable. No one knows what you're thinking. No one knows your next step. No one can prepare for you. And because they can't prepare, they start to react. That reaction is where you gain the upper hand. You haven't lifted a finger, but you've created imbalance. This is the essence of mental warfare, not through confrontation, but through control of atmosphere. And the man who has mastered his own silence has mastered the environment. He sets the tone without speaking. He creates fear without threat. He disrupts the psychological rhythm of others simply by not participating in their need to be heard. When you operate in silence, people start to respect your presence before you even speak. They wonder what you're thinking. They wonder why you're so calm. They wonder what you know that they don't. And that wondering becomes tension. Tension is power, not the kind of power that brags or demands, but the kind that shifts the room. You become the one they can't predict, can't manipulate, can't pull into useless conversations. You stop reacting to bait. You stop volunteering your strategy. You stop explaining your boundaries. You don't need to justify your distance, your focus, your choices. You simply act, and that action, when backed by silence, becomes terrifying to those who thrive on attention. Weak men believe silence is passivity. They mistake stillness for weakness. But stillness is a weapon. The disciplined man sits in silence, listens carefully, absorbs everything, and strikes with precision. He doesn't need to argue, because his presence is a response. He doesn't need to beg, because his absence says everything. He doesn't need to respond, because his silence puts pressure on others to reveal their hand. While the crowd is shouting their plans to the world, he is refining his in secret. And by the time they see what he's built, he's already 10 moves ahead. This kind of silence requires control. It requires you to kill the impulse to prove yourself. It demands you eliminate the addiction to being seen, validated, or liked. It forces you to let go of the need to constantly clarify who you are. You become comfortable being misunderstood. You become ruthless in your detachment. You realize that every time you over-explain, you give away your position. Every time you argue, you reveal your weakness. Every time you seek approval, you surrender your authority. But when you say nothing, when you move in silence, when you let your results speak for you, no one can touch you. Even your enemies become unsure of their power. They insult you, and you do not flinch. They provoke you, and you do not respond. They spread lies, and you remain still. That silence becomes psychological armor. It makes you immune to drama, gossip, slander. You do not need to correct what you know is false. You are not controlled by perception. You are governed by mission, and that mission is too important to be distracted by noise. The silent man has made a vow to let his results be his only language. Every minute wasted explaining yourself is a minute taken from building. So he builds, quietly, relentlessly, alone if necessary. People start to fear what they cannot access. When they can't read your intentions, when they don't know your weaknesses, when they're unsure of your alliances, they panic, they guess, they project. And their guessing turns into mistakes. That's when you strike, not with words, but with movement. When you are silent, every move becomes magnified. Every step becomes a message. Every decision becomes a statement. And because you've spoken so little, those statements echo louder than any speech ever could. Silence is not the absence of voice. It is the presence of discipline. And that discipline becomes dominance in any room, any conflict, any battlefield. You train this silence through daily withdrawal from unnecessary expression. You kill the habit of explaining yourself to people who don't matter. You stop offering your thoughts to crowds that haven't earned them. You teach yourself that words are valuable and should be used like a sword, not like confetti. You learn to weaponize your presence by letting your silence do the talking. And in time, your silence begins to say everything. It says you're not here for validation. You're not here to entertain. You're not here to be understood. You're here to win, to build, to conquer, not through volume, through ruthless mental clarity disguised as quiet stillness. Power isn't built in noise. It's built in ruthless silence. While the world screams for attention, the rare man turns inward, sharpening himself through disciplined focus. He doesn't beg for respect. He doesn't chase applause. He doesn't argue with the blind. He simply disappears into himself, returning only when the results can no longer be ignored. The weak man is always available, always reacting, always explaining, always seeking external cues to feel alive. But the self-focused man builds from within. He doesn't need to be understood, he needs to be effective. By mastering self-focus, you enter a new battlefield. One where emotion no longer dictates action, where silence becomes your strategy, and where your fixation on personal evolution makes you immune to the noise of the world. You no longer depend on opinions to define your value. You no longer collapse when things fall apart. You are not built on applause. You are built on precision. This is how the coldest rule for mental power works. It does not teach you to dominate others first. It teaches you to dominate yourself so thoroughly, so unapologetically, that the world is forced to adapt to your presence. Not because you're loud, but because your silence speaks louder than any command. You are no longer controlled. You are no longer moved. You are no longer manipulated. You have become the strategist of your own mind. And that, in a world full of mental slaves, makes you the most dangerous man alive.